So, today we're talking about The Rule of Jenny Penn, which is a horror thriller from director James Ashcroft, written by James Ashcroft and Eli Kent. It stars John Lithgow and Geoffrey Rush, who was once in Kath and Kim, which I completely forgot about, which is a bit of an info nugget for you. Dan from Nancy Boys is here. How you doing, Dan?
I'm good, thanks, Phil. Thanks for having me back. And,
Excellent.
For putting this film on my radar as well. It wasn't one I was aware of, so it was a really good chance to have a good watch.
A misanthropic judge is confined to a care home, finds himself in deadly conflict with its resident tyrant, played by John Lithgow. So, Stefan Mortensen, played by Geoffrey Rush, suffers a near-fatal stroke. We see that right at the beginning. It goes right in there. Leaves him partially paralysed, confined to that retirement home. Resistant to the staff and distant from his friendly roommate, Mortensen soon clashes with seemingly gentle resident Dave Crealy, who is John Lithgow, secretly terrorising the home with a sadistic game called The Rule of Jenny Penn. He's got a puppet on his hand, which is a baby doll, a dementia doll. He's using that as an instrument of cruelty, and what begins as childish torment very quickly escalates into far more sinister and disturbing incidents. Can I just first of all say right from the start that I really, really enjoyed this movie?
Same. It's again because I said I didn't really know about it, and I went in very blind. I think I read a description, and I don't think I read it properly because I thought it was going to be a bit more black magic, and actually it wasn't. It was a proper psychological thriller that, I really liked it. It was very unique. I've not seen anything like that. There was some elements of misery that actually it kind of reminded me of.
I was just about to say the same thing, because a lot of critics are saying it's very similar to Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which is another favourite of mine. I think it's kind of got elements of that, but I don't think it copies either film. I think it obviously has similarities.
Yeah, there were occasional moments I thought, this giving me misery vibes, like that sort of helplessness. But very much its own thing, and I just thought it was such a unique premise. I will say, as someone in their approaching mid-40s, and I'm very much in the thick of. I've been in there for a few years of
such a baby.
I know, I don't feel like it. I thought, but so you start to think about your own mortality in your 40s and your parents dying and all that really dark stuff, and this is a true horror film in that respect. I really felt it, and there were times I just thought, I don't know if I'm actually mentally in the right place to see this right now. And I think in a way that's good. I mean, horror is about, I think, sometimes we confronting some of that stuff.
What is clever about this film is that there is quite a lot of black humour, and that comedy, although it's very brief, the comedy, but when the comedy does hit, it hits in a really realistic way that you kind of identify with elements of it. And especially, like you mentioned, it's such a good point about reaching that age where people maybe that have gone through this kind of experience. It does touch a nerve, and I think that is the true horror of it, isn't it? Like you say.
It really touched the nerve, and again, in a good way. And it's things that are real and that are happening. And I've been in my parents aren't at that age yet, but my grandparents have been. I have two nans left, and I've seen them both in homes, and there is that weird atmosphere of, I can't put your finger on in an old people's home, of people just stop caring as much. There's not as much focus on interaction, and there were bits of it that just felt really realistic. And actually the whole thing about, part of me was screaming at the TV, why isn't no one doing anything about this? I also understood, if you're a nurse or you run a home care home and you're hearing daily, ramblings about something that's happening, you're probably going to disregard it. There are staff everywhere. Why can't people see what's going on? But it's like school in a way. It was that similar kind of head bully, kids all being kind of under the cosh, really interesting. And I've never seen it played out from the perspective of pensioners and a care home. Terrifying.
The story starts with Judge Stefan's stroke, and we see him at work collapsing. And that is such a great way. I mean, it sounds awful, doesn't it, saying it's such a great way to start a movie when someone's collapsed with a stroke. But actually, it does, because it really draws you in, and you think, oh my goodness. And you see there's this great shot of his feet on a wheelchair, because he's obviously in a wheelchair, just coming out of being treated in hospital, and he's obviously gone into this home. And it goes straight in there, because you see him at work, and it sets such a great precedent for what's about to happen, because you've got a little bit of his background story with regards to what work he does, and you know straight away that he's someone that doesn't suffer fools gladly as well. That character is obviously, in a very professional, very responsible job. He's a judge, so straight away that he's not going to take anything lying down, and he doesn't, because when you see him being introduced with John Lithgow's character, he doesn't take any of that nonsense.
Yeah. And it's I love that there's a realism to that you can imagine that scenario playing out, that it would take one person to go in and be like, hang on a minute, because you've probably had years of this person just being a complete tyrant and just controlling everyone, because these are people that are at most risk of being able to not do anything about it or have any kind of power or agency at all. And when they do flag it, kids can flag stuff to their parents who can then do something about it. Like the elderly, just even if they flagged it, it's going to be flagged as like dementia or they're not of sound mind. I think that was the true horror of, like, God, as you get older, you lose your voice, and that's what came out in this. Was this guy was just controlling everyone, knowing that.
And we're completely on his side, and I think the filmmakers are as well, because it's in a way telling that story that so many people go through, where they get to a certain age where they are disregarded, and especially in a care home, you kind of see that side of the carers as well, because like you say, they must go through this daily and hourly, experiencing quite a lot. It's a stressful job to be in, to be a carer, and so you kind of see their perspective as well a little bit, but also, like you say, when you're screaming at the screen, because you want someone to witness what he's going through. He screams for help so many times, and he's just ignored. And he's like, you see him, like, because he's had a stroke as well, and then he has another setback in there, and he's not able to express himself. So you feel that claustrophobia, you feel that anguish and that frustration that he's feeling.
Watching it at first, I was like, this is kind of silly, because someone would intervene, and you think, how many care home scandals have there been over the last however many years, well, since care homes have been a thing, of residents being ignored, being neglected, being abused, and everyone turning a blind eye because they're just knackered and they just don't want to care, or they want to not see it. So actually, I'm like, that scenario is probably playing out in many other places. That in real life horror, and the more it went on, the more actually it is believable, because people are flawed, and they don't want to deal with something like that.
So let's talk about Dave Crealy. Dave Crealy is the guy who's tormenting everyone else there, including Judge Stefan. But Dave Crealy is played brilliantly, I have to say, by John Lithgow, who is, let's remember, he's over 6'2". He's like 6'4", isn't he? So he towers above everybody else, which in itself is quite an ominous thing, which is so brilliantly cast as well. The two lead performances, I thought, were just incredible, like flawless.
Game of chess.
Yeah, and Dave Crealy has this thing, obviously, with this puppet, which you think about, because it's obviously on the poster as well, and you think, okay, that's been used before, so I don't know how terrifying that is going to be, but it was absolutely terrifying, because what he does with this baby doll, the rule of Jenny Penn, and you have to kind of go along with it and almost bow down to Jenny Penn, who's like the ruler, so you have to lick her ass, essentially, and what he does is where you have to lick his arm, because that's obviously the bottom of the puppet, and they're having to do that, and Judge Stefan doesn't do it initially, but there gets to a point where he does have to do it, because he can't control himself.
A really low point of the film,
it's just awful.
Yeah, because without giving too much away, there's a definite moment in the film where you think it's been sorted out, and then it hasn't. It's a real crusher.
And the song that he's singing as well, because he's singing that Cockney pub song. Was it Knees on Mother Brown, isn't it? And I never want to hear that song again, because it's just
it's so bleak. It's so bleak, and it's so true to life about what it's probably like. It makes you. I mean, me and my friends always talk about living in a commune. Like, at some point we'll get to a certain age and all sell up and we'll buy a big house. I've never wanted to do that more. I messaged them all off, just like, please let me do the commune. I do not want to be in an old people's home.
Yeah, it's a proper horror story, isn't it? I mean, it's not something that you'd. I mean, you wouldn't want to go to a care home after watching this movie, just in case there's someone else like.
You know, it was quite a nice care home as well by the looks of things, but it's that complete infantilization, I think, that you get, that you don't really get at any other point in your life, unless you are a kid, in which case it's fine because you can indulge it. But like someone like the judge, who's so smart and has his long career of being quite distinguished, being just treated like a kid and not being believed about anything.
Clever thing about how the care home looks at the beginning, because at the beginning it does look quite a nice place to be because it's clean and tidy and the people there are really sweet. You know, the other people being careful. But then soon, obviously, once we're introduced to John Lithgow's character, and there's one scene which will just remain in my head, is where he's watching TV with the other people, and he's sat right at the front, and he's looking up at the screen, and he's obviously got this puppet on his hand, and he's just laughing loudly at the TV, like a proper maniacal character. Yeah.
And you just think, God, I'd be straight away like, right, I'm going to my room, and then you'd never be in that communal area ever again.
Great cinematography as well, because I mean the film does really look good, and there are certain scenes where the camera's at unusual angles, so you've got like the camera up above looking down on people, and there's these weird shots where, you know, there's lots of close-ups and everything else is blurred, so you've got like proper definition, and also you see John Lithgow's character in the background, like standing at a window looking out, and it's not initially clear that he's there, and then the camera slowly pans in and you realise that he's there just watching.
Yeah, just really sinister, and it's like, are we looking at this from the point of view of fellow residents? Are we looking at this from the point of view of, like, you know, the nurse or society is looking down on these elderly people who've just lost all status? Yeah, as I said, I found it particularly heavy, just in line with where I'm at in life, because I think for someone in their 20s, this probably won't hit in the same way, because I just think you can't account for it as maybe you haven't seen a relative go through that, or you're not approaching that moment in life where that's going to be reality. It was like the food really bothered me, like the sloppy food they had to eat, and the
gruel, yeah,
and it wasn't it wasn't comedically bad. It just looked so damn depressing. Like all of it just looked so sad. And you just think, God, like I really don't want that to be how I end up. And then there's that whole bit where they lock the gate. And then there's a close-up. I love the scene. It was such a simple thing of a close-up on a sign that just says doors are locked at 6 for security reasons. You think, God, you are basically just being committed. Like, you know, as much as it looks nice, it's still essentially a psychiatric ward, and you're done. You're locked up. So very, very bleak and very like triggering in terms of some of the thoughts and the themes, but just so good, so original.
Yeah, I don't think it does push too far in the sense of, you know, because certain films like this are really uncomfortable to watch because you're seeing people terrorised, and you're seeing, I guess that's horror through and through though, isn't it? Because you see a lot of that, because you have to, because you got to feel that horror.
Yeah, I thought what was clever was that there were a few scenes where it will just linger on another background character, like one of the peripheral elderly residents, and you can almost see through their face that they've been terrorised by Dave Crealy. You don't see it and you don't know what's happened, but there's almost like a collective trauma that you can pick up on. That's how I felt. Like, and obviously it comes through mostly from, I've forgotten the judge's roommate's character now, but he's kind of the conduit to that, which is, hey, you've been getting it, but so have I. But you get a sense then that this is like pervading the whole home, that none of them want to speak out against it, and they've all been a victim of him at some point.
That character was great as well. I can't remember the actor's name, but he kind of succumbs to it, doesn't he, to a certain extent, because he's so exhausted by it, I suppose, exhausted by being terrorised.
Well, he's kind of a good foil to the judge character. It's like, look, this is the character that kind of shows you what happens if you just give in, and you're just going to get terrorised every night, and it's not going to stop. And I think the fact that they were able to convey that he had that presence without showing it was probably scarier, because then your mind fills in the blanks of what's he been doing to that woman or that guy. Like, they all had this like look on their face of like relief when certain things happen, and when he's back on the scene.
So star rating, Dan, for the role of Jenny Payne, which by the way is out in cinemas on the 14th of March from Vertigo releasing.
On the basis of it like being a great film that I probably would never want to watch again, it's got to be a 4.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I would watch it again. I kind of would want to share it with other people who hadn't seen it.
I probably would watch it with. I would recommend it to people. I don't know, like it's a bit like. I mean, The Coffee Table. I have gone back and rewatched that, and we reviewed that about a year ago. And I think the setup in this wasn't as horrendous, but it was definitely like it pulled much more a realistic feeling, which I don't necessarily want to inflict on some people. I'm like, yeah, you're not ready for it. It's actually quite painful in times to think about. Well, could that be me in 40 years' time? Like it's quite scary.
Yeah, that is the true horror, isn't it?
True horror. Like a slasher movie is like, it's separate. I can watch an American slasher movie and watch teenagers get sliced up and think that's probably not going to happen to me living in like South London. Well, you never know. But like that film, you're like, yeah, I could see that happening, and I could see in there being a resident that I really hate, that I can't escape from, that no one really wants to listen to my view on because I'm just an old fuddy-duddy and like, what do I know? Like, yeah, really, really scary.
Yeah, I thought it was terrific. So 4 stars from Boys on Film. Don't forget to subscribe. Good to see you, Dan. And we shall see you on the next one.
Will do. Thanks very much.